Hello, everyone. This is Martin Willis, and I want to apologize. The internet went out during our live show, right at the beginning of this show with Jim Mars. So we did record just a few minutes ago, and you get a total unedited version, as well as the news from the other night is recorded with Alejandro Rojas. So again, I apologize for the delay, but here it is. And before I forget, next week we have Catherine Martin and Stan Friedman. It's going to be on the show here.
And it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham-Pars incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer, really, standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes, and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on podcastufo.com. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello, and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we have the one and only Jim Mars coming up this evening. Before that, though, we have Alejandro Rojas coming up with the UFO Updates. And I want to thank those people who support the show. I want to also tell everyone that I'm going to reopen the forum. Few people are interested in posting on the forum. And we had, I counted something like 13,000 spammers in just a few days. So it's closed as far as signing up. All you have to do is email me what you'd prefer for a username, and I will get you going on the forum if you'd like to join. It's right on the menu bar on the website on podcastufo.com. And so if you are supporting the show again, thank you. If you'd like to find out how to do that for just $2 or more a month, it's right on our website. And if you want to listen to the whole show for free, podcastufo.com every Wednesday evening at 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's also on psnradio.com, I think it is. And it's the whole show also plays on the Dark Matter Digital Network every Thursday from 10 to midnight Eastern Standard Time as well. Alejandro, what's going on?
What's going on is UFOs are going on, buddy.
Yeah, we had a little technical difficulty when we tried to connect earlier, and
we did.
And you said, "Hey, there's a lot of stories, a lot of good stuff."
Yeah,
so
there is lots of good stuff. And you said, "Oh, the government took us down," so
they did.
Hopefully, they let us stay connected.
Well, we'll try to get through this one.
Yeah, and that's your tax money well spent. They're able. We were talking. They're on the ball.
Yeah, they're taking everyone
all over
down.
the place.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
All you have to do is say the word UFO, it goes across the NSA computer, and that's it. You're down.
And then boom.
Yeah.
They're like, gotcha, sucker. Okay, well, cool. Yeah, lots of UFO news. First of all, the Podesta email, WikiLeaks, a lot of buzz about that, and really nothing too extraordinary to add to that, to those stories that I haven't already covered. But you can go to openminds.tv, and I have updated my stories on that to Tom DeLongstring and the other one, but you'll see that right on the front page. So the only interesting thing is there's been a couple more emails. Tom DeLong talking about a meeting with Steven Spielberg and some other people in the media. And then on the Edgar Mitchell side, just what we had already talked about, more emails about how Bethesda really was trying to set up a meeting with Mitchell, and also Rebecca Hardcastle, who is someone who worked with Mitchell, who is trying to help with that. She wrote a blog about, how that all happened, and there's a link there too. So nothing totally new there, but there are some interesting UFO sightings that we posted recently.
All right.
Yeah, good stuff. So this is the first one I want to talk about. Is actually happened a few years ago. This is at Fort Benning in Georgia, and this is a fun story. So it happened on July 10th, 2005, where this guy said him and his platoon were out training, And some of the guys came back and said, we saw a UFO. There's this UFO following us and watching us. It was really weird. It was just this silver orb up in the sky. And the guy said, yeah, right, you're full of it. He goes out the next day, and sure enough, there's this silver metallic orb up there. He said it buzzed very loudly, but there was no holes or openings. It was just a solid orb that was up about 50 feet in the air. Everybody saw it. It was a big deal. And after that, they didn't see it again. So he posted it, and he was like, I've been grappling with this whole thing the whole time. Was it a drone? He's like, I think it was some sort of drone the government was experimenting with and, using it on us to watch us. But he's like, I've never seen any technology like this since, so I don't know. So, yeah, that's a really weird one.
I could see that the government could have drones all the way back in 2005, but for it to be a total solid mass without any, cameras or anything like that or
that's
whatever.
The weird part. Yeah, the weird part is it seemed like a solid metallic object, and that is really weird. And, of course, if it came out it is military, that would actually probably explain a ton of different UFO sightings. So, yeah, that's a really odd one. That's kind of a cool one. Another one is from years ago. This actually happened in 94 or 95, but it's kind of cool. So Philip Mantle, he's a guy in the UK. By the way, I should mention that last one was a MUFON case that was written by Roger Marsh. This one is provided from Philip Mantle. So he heard from, there's a wing commander who had a sighting, and I think we talked about that last time. Well, because of he posted that story, another guy, this guy is a flight lieutenant, sent him a story from the Royal Air Force of his sighting report. So this guy had his sighting in 94 or 95. He can't remember. It was Christmas time. But essentially he was at the Royal Air Force Base Lineham in Wiltshire when they were catching this weird object on radar. And it was this kind of blob, this mass that moved around and then, boom, exploded and flew off in several directions. And sure enough, one of the guards called, and they were really freaked out and said, hey, I saw this bright white light that exploded and went in all directions. So this flight lieutenant actually reported it. And he said that, when he reported it, they said, well, we usually don't pay attention to goofy kind of UFO sightings. We think they're goofy. But he's like, well, but you're a lieutenant, so you're an officer. And so we take these much more seriously. And they took down the report. And that was about it. But, yeah, he wrote Philip Mantle about this. Philip Mantle then actually did do some FOIA work, and he got some information. He got the original sighting report. And so we've posted that in the story as well. So Philip Mantle runs the Flying Disc Press out of the UK. Really cool guy, and he contributes some stories to us sometimes. Another international contributor we have is Andreas Müller, and he's actually from Germany. So he was, like many others, upset that, you might have heard this, the Ministry of Defense. So we've talked about this, how it was actually John Burroughs who was asking them about UFO files, and they admitted, oops, we do have these 18 UFO files that we forgot to send out with the rest because, for years they were putting out batches of UFO files, and then they finished, and they said, that's it, we gave you guys all our UFO files. But then John Burroughs found out that, hey, there's more. So they said they were going to release these quickly, but they keep delaying. They said they were going to get it out in 2016 early. Then they said in the summer. All of these times have passed. The latest they've done is pushed it all the way back now to early 2017. So it's just very odd they keep delaying these files. So Andres, the Open Minds contributor, he wrote to them and said, hey, what's going on? Why do these keep getting delayed? And it's kind of concerning what he found. They said that first they have to release it from the Ministry of Defense to the National Archives. They look it over and they prepare it, and then they release it. But when they looked at them, they found that there's more information in there that should have been not released, so they've got to redact some of the information, and so they have to reprocess it, and that's why it's delayed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they say they sincerely apologize, but it's kind of concerning that, what the heck's going on? Why do they have to keep re-examining these files? I mean, once in them. So Andres kind of provided the text of the letter he received from the Ministry of Defense and wrote that up on openminds.tv. So you could see that and those updates from the WikiLeaks at openminds.tv.
Did you say it was at 18 files? Is that what you said?
Correct.
It just seems to redact 18 files. If it was just personal information, wouldn't take that long. But I don't know how these things work.
Well, it's weird. And Andres provided a list of exemptions from the British Freedom of Information Act. So that's what they're referencing. So somehow in this list of exemptions, some of the information in those files meet those exemptions, and somehow that was overlooked. So people can look through those exemptions to see what sort of things they could have been, but it's just kind of a shot in the dark, I guess, as to what caused those delays at this point. So, unfortunately, more and more delays. There has been someone in the House of Lords who actually brought this up, a representative. The House of Lords is weird in Britain. Essentially, it's rich people who the Queen makes a lord, and then they get their own branch of government. But it's a bit chaotic. There's tons of them, and so it's kind of a branch that's more for show. But they do have more access to the government. They can ask questions, such as one did. He said, "Why are these files getting delayed?" And they just kind of blew him off and said, "Sorry, we're working on it," type of thing. But so there are people on the other side of the pond looking at all of this, but and there is anticipation all over the place. But what's in those files, hopefully we'll find out, unless somehow they accidentally lose them, which our government is prone to do.
Yes, it does happen. Well, is that it for this evening, sir?
That is it for this evening.
All right. We'll talk to you next week, Alejandro. Thank you.
All right. Talk to you later, buddy.
All right. All right, everyone. So hang in there for the quick music break. We'll be right back with Jim Mars. Jim, welcome to the show.
Well, Martin, it's a good pleasure to be with you.
And sorry about the other night. The internet went down all night long and took a couple of days to get it fixed, and actually went down just before the show earlier today, before the recording. But this is Saturday, and I do apologize to the live listeners. We just couldn't. I couldn't restore the internet the other night, but I also want to thank you, Jim, for the willingness to come back here on a Saturday and record a show. I really appreciate it.
That's quite all right, and I totally understand. The other day I was supposed to be doing something on the computer, and I guess it was a Skype thing or whatever, and then my computer, good old Windows 10, it just kicked to red and said, "We're updating. Don't change anything, and don't turn off your computer." And it went all the way through the time I was supposed to be on the interview.
Oh, no.
You know, Martin, we're living in a time now when we don't run the computers. They run us.
Yeah, Alejandro Rojas, where I always, a lot of times I will pre-record news with him, and we were doing that the other day, and all of a sudden his Skype started updating. We had to postpone. Yeah,
Yes.
we have no control. You're right.
That something's not right about that.
Yeah, seems
The
so.
human should always be in control.
Yeah. Well, you know what Elon Musk says about AI? It's going to be the death of us all.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it may very well be. And this goes all the way back. I remember reading an early day science fiction story way back there somewhere where they finally put together the world computer, man. It was all the computers in the world all locked together, and they said, okay, let's put the ultimate question to it. Said, okay, world computer said, we want peace. Bring peace to this world. So to make a long story short, the computer goes, jigga. Okay, let's see. War's a big problem. War's caused by people. Okay, we got to get rid of the people. So they start eliminating the human race, so that then we'd have peace on this planet.
Yeah. Well, actually, I know I'm starting off way off topic here, but actually, in a conversation I had with someone that's pretty involved in like searching about future and AI, said that eventually it could just come to the point where someone would give a command, okay, your job is to destroy all humans and whatever it takes, and it would start replicating machines and self-replicating or whatever. There could be that power someday.
That sounds like Skynet.
Yeah, right, yeah. So, yeah, it could be. Hopefully we won't, we'll have some control over artificial intelligence before we get to that point. There should be some fail-safes built in, I would imagine. But anyway, Jim, I know like 95% of the people out there know who you are, and actually I've had requests to have you on the show almost since day one in 4 years. So glad you're finally on. But for the person that somewhere on the planet that's listening to the show that may not be familiar with who Jim Marrs is, can you go into your background? And I know I heard you say at one point that you liked unusual things or something like that.
Yeah, I'm kind of gravitated to that. Yeah. No, basically, I'm just an old Texas newspaper reporter, okay? I got a degree in journalism back in the days of the old Republic when we actually were taught real journalism, like look beyond the official pronouncements and try to find out the truth, and I don't see that happening much anymore. Then, of course, I was an avid reader since I was a child. And particularly, I finally gravitated into science fiction. And you're talking about how things come about. I was just thinking that, science fiction is prophesied. H.G. Wells prophesied automatic doors. Arthur C. Clarke prophesied voice-controlled computers. Submarines, of course, were first described by Jules Verne. And then L. Ron Hubbard, he once was writing about handheld electronic devices where you can actually read books on them. So hey, they've always been ahead of their time. And so in my newspaper career, I tended to gravitate towards the weird stories, the ones that nobody could quite explain. Other reporters and other editors, they tend to shy away from those stories, because it doesn't have a clear-cut ending and a clear-cut resolution. So it's like, oh, well, let's just leave that one alone. But that's the ones I always liked. So anyway, I never left journalism, but I have to say that journalism left me. And so as a result, in the last several years, I've been putting out information in the form of books. I now have 5 New York Times bestsellers, and in a wide variety of things. Martin, we have become a very specialized society. The lawyers know law, and the bankers know banking, and the doctors know doctoring, but very seldom do they reach over and learn much anywhere else. And I think this is a detriment to our society. If you'll think back to the great philosophers of history, Plato, Socrates, people like that, where are our philosophers today? Do you know anybody that's making a living being a philosopher? No. I've met some, but usually they're out on the street begging for spare change. So what we really need, so I am kind of a generalist. I know a lot about a lot of things, and not a whole lot about anything, except a few things. Because I was here at the time, and because I studied it and worked very closely with some of the earliest of the researchers in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I do know a lot about the Kennedy assassination, and that was reflected in my 1980s book, Crossfire, The Plot That Killed Kennedy. It has now been released in 2013 in an updated version, and has gotten a very, very warm reception because it's really everything you need to know about the Kennedy assassination. It's just all there. You can hear it from the witnesses, from the technical reports, from the police reports, from the federal investigations. It's all there. And that led, of course, to the question of well, then, wait a minute, what's the next big secret government cover-up? And almost everybody said, we want to know about UFOs. So I said, okay, I kind of do too. So I began to dig in, investigate UFOs, and that led to the publication of my book, Alien Agenda, which is an overview of the UFO alien situation, going all the way back to the ancient astronauts and coming forward to the cattle mutilations and the crop circles and the so-called abductions and et cetera, and then, of course, that led to, well, now, wait a minute, how come they're not interacting more openly with Earth? And then I think the answer came back and said, well, there's nobody that speaks for Earth, and until we have somebody who can speak for the Earth, I don't think we're going to have open contact with our intergalactic neighbors. And so then that led to a question, well, then who does speak for Earth? Who's trying to speak for Earth? And that led to rule by secrecy, the secret societies that permeate our societies and operate in the dark and with various agendas and objectives. And I think we really need to know about that. And then that led to the rise of the Fourth Reich, the fact that, yes, we beat the Germans in World War II, but we didn't defeat the Nazis. They weren't even at the surrender table. We just forced them to move, and a lot of them, thousands of them, came to the United States and was rolled into our military-industrial complex under the aegis of fighting the Russians and providing us with modern technology. And, of course, the problem is that not only did we get their technology, we got their philosophy. And that's why today we are seeing the rise of the Fourth Reich in the United States, with just running parallel to what happened to the Germans in the 30s. They had the Reichstag fire. We had 9/11. They had the Enabling Act. We had the Patriot Act. They had the consolidated the police forces into the Gestapo. We consolidated them into Homeland Security. I mean, we're just following right down the road, and nobody seems to know because nobody knows their history.
Yeah, as to say, history repeats itself. When you were
right,
saying,
I've got a cartoon sitting here. It's my favorite. It says, "Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah,
those who do study history are doomed to stand by helplessly while everybody else repeats it."
Never heard that part of it, of the riddle.
Yeah, but it's so true. It's so true. You may know what's going on, but nobody else does. So what the heck?
Yeah. Funny you mentioned this thing about specializing, going back to that, because that in my real career is I'm a fine arts and antique appraiser, and I'm very busy, and because I'm a generalist. That's my title. There's everyone now is specialists out there. When it comes to fine arts or whatever it is, they're all specialists, and there's very few generalists. So I'm busy all the time because of that.
Good. Yeah. Well, and see, that's what gives you such cachet when you doing your business, because if somebody's real specialized and they get something and it doesn't fit into their known category, well, then they're kind of at a loss. But you know enough about a lot of variety of things, you can kind of say, well, I think it's over into here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Well, in reading all this science fiction stuff, that's another thing I wanted to bring up. L. Ron Hubbard, everybody thinks of L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology. Well, well, okay, number one, I'm not a Scientologist and probably never will be. And but I was reading L. Ron Hubbard way back in the 50s and 60s, 70s, because he, at the time, a lot of people don't know this, but he was one of the top-tier science fiction authors.
That's right.
Along with Ray Bradbury and Arthur C. Clarke and, people like that. And so I remember reading Battlefield Earth, and I thought what a cool book it was. It was really, really interesting because it just goes all over the place. But the key thing is that unlike what we've seen here in recent years, the modern audiences who've gone to the show, see, they've all been seeing these murderous and alien invasions, such as the old classics, Earth versus the Flying Saucer, or the Blob, or Invaders from Mars, or even the more recent Independence Day, the Puppet Masters, Cowboys versus Aliens. Well, okay, Hubbard had a whole different tact, and I just thought it was so cool because in Battlefield Earth, they don't just come here and land and blow up everything and try to attack everybody. No, it's just a business deal. It's just all business. The intergalactic bankers loan money to the Intergalactic Mining Corporation, who sends some of their mining people here to Earth to strip mine the resources of the Earth. And, of course, there's these pesky humans that are kind of in the way. So they send a security force under these big, giant, hairy space guys that they call Cyclos. And after a while, the book takes place in the year 3000, and for 1,000 years they've occupied the Earth. And most humans are scattered into small, primitive tribes, and they basically have forgotten that they have been conquered by this alien race. And it takes the hero of the book, John Goodboy Tyler, to realize that what's going on, because he actually gets taken to the Cyclos headquarters where they're going to use him as a slave house servant, and he begins to realize what's going on. And from then on, it's how to mount a counter attack, how to gain back control of the Earth, which might someday prove a pretty useful template. But anyway, I just thought it was great, and now I see that they have released the 21st edition of Battlefield Earth, and you can go to battlefiedearth.com and you can check it all out. But the thing that gets me, Martin, is that in addition to the book, which I found very interesting, now they made a movie about the year 2000. It kind of got panned, and I can understand why. The book is just so wide sweeping, and then they tried to scrunch it into this film, and it just didn't quite work. So it was one of these cases where the movie didn't really follow the book, and I think that was their problem. Yeah. But anyway, now they're back with the book back out, and I think you can get the whole book for pretty cheap right now, too. I'm not sure how much. But go to battlefiedearth.com or go to Amazon. I'm sure you can find it. But what I wanted to tell you was they're also issuing a audio book of Battlefield Earth. And this thing is absolutely amazing. They've got 68 voice character actors portraying about 190-something characters with 150,000 sound effects thrown in, and a full-blown musical score written just for this purpose, for this book. I know, wow. It's like I've heard a little bit of it, and I'll tell you, if you're going on a long vacation or if you have a really long commute or whatever, this would be the thing to do, man, because it's like a movie for the mind. Keep you out on the road, but man, listen to this, and you'll have it all right there in front of you. It's really cool.
Now, isn't that a real long? I mean, that's a big book, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's real thick, and in fact, the audio book is like 47 hours. I know. It is, whoa.
That's a whole work week and then some. How about that?
That's true. That's true.
Wow, amazing.
But it's already made big waves, and a lot of people have really recommended it. And again, I think you can go to battlefiedearth.com and probably listen to some of the audiobook. So I would say give it a shot because it's really interesting. And it's kind of timely, too, because right now, as you well know, we just had the SpaceX Falcon 9 blow up, and we've had some other space disasters. It almost seems like somebody doesn't want us getting off this planet. Well, and, of course, we've been to the moon, supposedly, 6 times. And yet, that was 30 years ago. We ain't never gone back.
I know. That's always been puzzling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that comes to mind when we talk about this business proposition and them strip mining Earth and all that, are we unique as a planet that we would have resources that? I mean, I don't even know this.
I'm not sure anybody does. I get what you're getting at, and I do know this, that I'm old enough to remember before we went to the moon, the idea was we were going to go to the moon, we were going to set up a base, we were going to colonize the moon, we were going to mine the moon for its mineral resources, and that they would pay for the space program. So, wait a minute, what happened to that?
And that could be a reality because of the hydrogen-3, I think it is. I can't remember if that's accurate, but it's very...
And now we're finding that there's all this water, frozen water, underneath the surface of some of Jupiter's moons. There's no telling what's out there, but we just don't seem to be much interested anymore. When I was a young man in the 50s and the 60s, man, going to space was the deal. That was the bomb. That's what we're going to do. We're going to spread out. We're going to have more room for everybody. Everybody can have their own little community and blah, 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 And none of that happened. And I personally suspect that we're being quarantined. I think somebody up there says, listen, you guys are okay, but you just stick to yourself with your murderous hatred ways and killing machines, and you're not going to be allowed to bring that out to space. So as soon as you guys can learn to get along together, then you can come out here and join the rest of your neighbors. Yeah,
it is kind of embarrassing to represent a species that is so violent, and
and I don't understand it, man. All we want is peace, Now, if you don't want peace, we'll kill you. But I don't know why they get on us. We just want peace.
Right. Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe other societies, peace isn't even a word because, on different life on elsewhere because they don't have the other side of it.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about this? One of the reasons the United States has so quickly grown into one of the most prosperous and technologically advanced nations on the world is because from the get-go we have been a mongrel society. We're a mixture. We got a little bit of everybody. We got Africans, we got Germans, we got French, we got everybody came over here. The English came over here, the Spanish came over here. And we are just a polyglot race of people, and so maybe we've picked up some of the worst attributes of some, but for certain we have picked up the best attributes of many. Okay, and that's what made the United States so prosperous. Well, what if the Earth is the same way? What if on other worlds they have these homogenous races that, they all grow up together, maybe even have the hive mind, and they can all telepath with each other, and they can know what each other's thinking and know what's going on, which means you can't lie to anybody, and maybe they just come a different path than Earth, which has been seeded with several different races, and we're a blend of all of those, and again, we have some of the best attributes and then possibly some of the worst attributes. But the fact that we're just a big mixture makes us a kind of a wonderment to the other people out in the galaxy. They look at us and go, "Whoa, where did these folks come from?"
Now, I've mentioned this on my show probably about 3 or 4 times over the last 4 years. So, longtime listeners have heard me say it before. But years ago, I had an insurance broker. This was before I really got into the topic of UFOs or anything. I had an insurance broker, life insurance, and we were chatting one night, and he said that he used to be part of a special Air Force division during the Vietnam War that used to research the UFOs in Vietnam. And so I said, "Really?" I said, "Are they real?" And he says, "Yeah, UFOs are definitely real." And then I mentioned to him that I had in high school, I had written an essay for English. It was like one of the only A's I ever got in English. And it was that we were basically seeded, all the races were seeded and as an experiment, and I can't really remember, but that was kind of the gist of it. And anyway, he said, "Well, that's not really far off." And he says, the government's theory is that we're a petri dish. Those are his exact words.
Yeah, exactly.
So
they're just stirring the dish, seeing what they can come up with.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's, I don't know if he was BSing me. I have no idea, but it stuck with me.
I don't think so, Martin. And the reason I say that is because I've heard from other people that were in Vietnam, and I also talked about a UFO study that was going on there. In fact, I particularly remember talking with one guy who showed up there fresh from the States, and they put him at the big air base, whatever that was. Oh, well, anyway, and he was a radar operator. So they put him down there, and they set him down in front of the radar thing, and pretty soon he's calling the supervisor over. He's going, "What's all that stuff?" And he says, "Oh, that's the UFOs. Don't worry about them." So, yeah, they had daily experience with UFOs.
Yeah. Have you yourself ever had a sighting?
Well, yes and no. Mostly no. I have seen some strange acting lights in the sky, but I'm a good enough reporter, an objective enough reporter, that I'm not going to try to tell you that it's a spaceship full of alien people, because I just simply don't know that. And as far as actually seeing something up close that I definitely know is not from Earth, I'd have to say no, I really haven't. But the difference here is, and again, it's back with the generalization thing, is that in the course of my 50 years in journalism, I've talked to too many people, police officers, pilots, both commercial, military, air traffic controllers, military officers, and after a while, you finally go, all these people, and they tell you these incredible stories, and after a while you go, all these people cannot be lying, and their stories are consistent, and they match in many places. So I think what we're hearing is the truth, and I think, in fact, people now ask me, do you believe in aliens? And I say, no, I don't. I know there's aliens, and I know they're here, because I've talked to too many people, have too many stories. Even if half of them were somehow or another pathological or just crazy or just making stuff up or just trying to make a name for themselves, and you scrub half of them, that still leaves half that's legit. And that would be thousands of cases. So, of course, yeah, there's something going on, and we're not being told about it, which is one of my big gripes, because being a newsman, I want the truth. I want to know the truth about everything. If it's good, bad, I'm sorry, but it's okay. If the mafia is running the country, okay, so be it. If everybody knows that and accepts that, then who am I to say anything, okay? So, but I just want to know. I want to know the truth. I want to know who are they and why are they here, what are they doing. Pretty well answered a lot of that in my book, Alien Agenda. And I think there's other things going on today that point to when there's a space launch, and it's apparently not secret and maybe not military, like just putting up a communication satellite, it seems to go off without a hitch. But then, like on the Falcon 9, when they're experimenting, trying to put their own stuff up there, and or like the Titan 4, when they're trying to put a military package up into space, all of a sudden these things, they go off course, they disappear, they blow up. It's like, again, it's almost like we're being quarantined.
Wow. Yeah. Have you heard about this? It's recently out in the news that they found this all the way back in 1973 in Romania. They found this thing that looks like a tool or some type of
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that. Looks like some kind of early axe head,
And it's
I don't
made
know.
out of 90%.
It was very strange, but it certainly didn't look like a natural object.
And it's made out of 90% aluminum.
Right. Which they didn't even have until
200 years ago.
The turn of the 1800s. That's another thing about the Aurora spaceship crash, which happened right here near me. They have found pieces of molten aluminum near the crash site as late as 2013. And yet, when I got onto that story and was interviewing Mr. Oates, who had lived there since the early 1940s, he said there had been no explosions then, so it had to go back past this. And this, of course, was the account given in 1897. Said the silver cigar-shaped object settled towards the earth, hit the windmill stand, and blew up and scattered debris everywhere. Well, they've tested these balls of aluminum that are embedded in the trees and the rocks, indicating there was a tremendous explosion. And they find that it's mostly aluminum, but it is not quite the same composition as aluminum made today. Well, that had me go back and check the history of aluminum. In 1897, yes, they had aluminum,
very expensive.
but it cost more than gold.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
And so the idea that they were using that for a hoax or using that to try to build some phony baloney spaceship just doesn't make any sense at all. So see, we have all of this information, we have all this knowledge, but most people are not being told about it because the 5 corporations that control everything we see and hear does not tell us these things.
Yeah. Now, the Aurora crash, there's supposedly they buried the body in an unmarked grave.
Well, no, it was marked. When I got onto the story in 1973, there was a little piece of a headstone still there. And it was real interesting, Martin, because picture this. Here you've got this little upside-down U-shaped headstone with a V across it laying on its side with little circles in the middle, like a little saucer-shaped object with portholes.
Wow.
But I wrote about it. Bill Case for the Dallas Morning News wrote about it. People started driving out there looking around, so they put a police guard on the cemetery for about 2 weeks.
Jeez.
And the town marshal would sit out there during the day, and then at night a Wise County sheriff deputy would patrol along there. And so that went along for about 2 weeks. And then the very night that they pulled the police guard, the little headstone went missing and hasn't been seen since.
Yeah. Well, probably, but they won't allow the body to be exhumed.
No, at the time. Well, number one, I don't think it's even there. I think the government's already exhumed it many years ago, so we're not missing anything. But and in fact, as late again as '73, Bill Case had a metal detector, and we went over the little short grave, and we found readings one near the headstone and 2 towards the middle. And I remember laughing and saying, "Yeah, that's probably his tricorder," that thing they use in Star Trek. And we laughed, and then. After the headstone went missing, I got a call from Case. He said, "Meet me up at Aurora." So I went up to Aurora, and he got his metal detector out. We went back over the grave, and there was no readings. And I said, "Whoa, what happened here?" Because it was quite obvious that the whole grave had not been disinterred. So we got on our hands and knees, and we found 3 little holes, one up near where the headstone had been, and then 2 right in the center, right where we had located the metal detection. And I said, "Man, somebody used some sophisticated equipment, came in here, located those metal objects, and then used like a core sampler or something to go down in there and just extract that out of that grave." I said, "Who do you think did that? Do you think that was the UFO researchers?" And he said, "No," and I didn't either. He said, "I think it was the government," and I did too.
Wow.
So they've known since 1897 that we're not alone, but they've kept it from us.
Now, so I want to talk to you about the government here in a second, but there was some speculation that was a small dirigible too. I've heard that. But again, aluminum, I know about aluminum as far as it was extremely expensive, like we just mentioned before, and it wouldn't make sense. But
well, now, as far as the dirigible goes, keep in mind that I went back and checked and found out that we've had balloons for a long time. They had balloons during the Civil War, but they were all tethered. Okay, they'd crank them up, and then they'd go way up there so they could scout the surrounding countryside. But as far as powered balloon flight, the first recorded powered balloon flight was in the same year as the Wright brothers flying, which would have been 1903, I believe. So, see, there was nothing man-made in the air in 1897.
Wow. Yeah, during the Civil War, those balloons were really dangerous. They'd blow up. I think
Right.
it was hydrogen. I think they had in them. I can't remember what it was, but
Well, if it's hydrogen, yeah, they blow up. That's why the Hindenburg blew up. But now, if they used helium, you could shoot them full of holes, and all they do is just slowly settle back down to the earth.
yeah. But there were problems with the balloons. I remember hearing about that in the Civil War.
Oh yeah, well,
Yeah.
just all kinds of problems. They put one up, and then the wind would pick up, and there it goes.
Yeah.
In fact, great story. Well, speaking of good science fiction stories, I think this was H.G. Wells too, and I can't remember the title of it. 15 Days in a Balloon or something like that. Anyway, it was took place during the Civil War, and these Yankees were trying to escape a prison camp, and then there's a couple of Confederates got caught with them, and they were all on this balloon, and they got swept away in this terrible storm, and ended up on this mysterious island. Maybe that's the name of it, Mysterious Island. Anyway, it's a cool story,
All right. Well, one of the things I've heard you mention a few times is the government, and it's always been a piece of the puzzle that's been a mystery. Well, there are so many mysteries, but another piece where I've wondered if there is a part of the government that really knows what's going on, and how compartmentalized is it, and is it need to know, and how do things get passed, say, all the way back from Roswell to current day? Who are the guards of the knowledge of that? Have you ever looked into any of that deeply?
Oh, yeah, of course. And that brings us back to MJ-12, if there is an MJ-12. Who is MJ-12? And MJ-12, of course, was the small clique of people, I think, that it's probably been run under the Technological Directorate of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And at some point way back there, I think Eisenhower was probably the last U.S. president who more fully understood the alien UFO question. Kennedy was not able to get to the questions, and he knew. In my book, Alien Agenda, I quote from a guy named Bill Holden, who was the loadmaster for Air Force One, and he told me that in the summer of 1963, I believe, when they went to Europe and Kennedy made his famous "Ich bin ein Berliner" speech, that there was kind of some stories about UFOs in the European media, and he said Kennedy was actually pretty approachable, and so he just went up to him and said, "Mr. President," he says, what do you think about UFOs and all these stories like that? And he said Kennedy grew quite serious and said, quote, "I would like to tell the public about the alien situation, but my hands are tied." Whoa. So even the President of the United States may not have full access to everything that's going on. But, hey, they are now finally admitting that the Pentagon, well, if you'll remember, the day before 9/11, Donald Rumsfeld publicly stated that the Pentagon could not account for $2.3 trillion. Oops, whoa, that's more money than their yearly budget for several years. And now today it's up past $8 trillion. Now, how does the government lose $8 trillion? And, of course, the fact is they don't. It went somewhere very, very secret. And I suspect it went to the space fleet.
Well, you can't even fathom what $1 trillion is. But if you tell someone if they counted day and night to 1 trillion, it would take them 32,000 years. That kind of gives you an idea of what $1 trillion is.
Exactly. Oh, well, gee, yeah, but I had it when it came in. Right? I don't know what happened to it. This is so ridiculous. Now who would be handling all that money? Okay, it'd be flowing among the defense contractors and the big aircraft corporations, and probably can be traced back to the Clinton Foundation, okay, which means that could explain why she and her campaign chairman, John Podesta, have actually made little comments about space and about UFOs, and maybe we need to look into that because, hey, I think they know. They know it's all real, and they don't want to look like dummies when it finally all comes out, so they're making little, Plus, if you stop and think about it, I would think that the liberals who are the supporters of Clinton, they're probably more open to the idea of UFOs and aliens than some of the staunch conservatives. So I think that was kind of a cheap political ploy, trying to garner more favor from their constituents.
Well, I don't know. That started with here in, close by to where I am in New Hampshire, a reporter asking Hillary, about the UFO issue.
Right. Right.
But, John Podesta's been interested in UFOs for years.
Well, let's put it this way. John Podesta's been in control of that issue for many years.
Yeah, you think so? Wow.
Yeah. Well, again, where do you think all those trillions went to? Do you think they just disappear? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Had to go somewhere. And that's why they're still trying to get Gary McKinnon back to this country, saying put him in prison. Although the Pentagon has admitted that, he hacked into the Pentagon computers, but he didn't really do any harm. Okay, so why are they trying to get him back here and punish him? Because when he got in the Pentagon computers, he found the names of the officers and the bases and the names of the ships that compromise our space fleet.
Well,
which we're paying for, but they won't even acknowledge. Kind of like chemtrails, we're paying. They're undoubtedly using our tax money to poison us, but then they won't even admit it's happening.
Oh, wow. Now, supposedly he was using just like I want to say it. I can't even remember what you call when you have internet over a phone line. What's it called? Anyway, I don't know how much information he got into. I know that there was some undoctored pictures and things like that, but I didn't realize that the government was still, the U.S. government was still after him. Are they really?
Oh, yeah, Gary McKinnon, yeah. Well, okay, and now here, connect the dots. You go back to the 33,000 missing emails that involved Clinton, also involved Podesta. And it's the only thing that's come out about that is that some of that was highly classified material, including some even special access. Well, special access, that's even higher than top secret. So they had access to what was going on up here, okay? And then you got all this missing money, and perhaps that's where it was all being laundered. And it's we don't know because who was it? Obama said he was going to have a transparent presidency. Well, I guess he has because I see right through him. But he hadn't told us anything, and neither has anybody else.
Yeah, I think any president that gets in there is up against. Well, they have their hands full to begin with, but I think they're all up against a brick wall when it comes to, revealing certain things.
So what you're saying is, and I totally agree, is that the President of the United States, the leader of the free world, is actually not in charge. And things are not going to get better until we start figuring out who truly is in charge and how to get some leverage over them, get them to do things that are in our interest, not their interest. Yeah,
for sure. Now, getting back to the money, the black projects or whatever that were some of those trillions went to. There's a lot of people talking about all the black triangles they see today, and they are speculating that they're secret government, aircraft. And I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that because I just can't see how something like that could be kept so secret. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I tend to think there's some validity to that. I mean, we already know about the Blackbird and SR-1 and various things like that they, for a long time, they said didn't exist, and now they admit, they exist. And I can't remember now if they've actually come out and admitted to the suborbital ship, the Aurora. They call the Aurora, interestingly enough. But everyone's pretty well acknowledging. Aviation experts already know that, that's there. Yeah, we do have secret government test craft. But see, don't fall into the trap of saying that because now we have some secret government test craft, that everything that everybody's seen all through the years has been secret government test craft, because I guarantee you in 1897 we didn't have any secret government test craft. There's something else going on in addition to that. But yes, and that's entirely possible. That's why when you do have something like an official UFO investigation like Blue Book, that's easy for them to say, oh, well, that was a secret government test craft. And then everybody goes, oh, okay. And that's the end of that. Well, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. We don't really know, but that's a good way to keep the whole thing covered up.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you ever look into the Stephenville? Is it Stevensville or Stephenville?
It's Stephenville.
Stephenville.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did, and that one is a great one. People really need to concentrate on that one, because here we had one night they had multiple sightings of these long, slow-flying, huge objects, maybe a mile wide, and that very night the local media in Dallas-Fort Worth actually did their job. And they called up the military and said, you guys got anything in the air? And they're all going, no, not us. We don't have anything in the air, So it kind of got to be a pretty big deal. And for the first time, again, on the major news programs, instead of snickering and saying, well, Farmer Jones said he saw something out the field, rolling their eyes, like they had been for years, they actually took it seriously and began to report on what was going on. And then the thing that really kills me is about 2 weeks later, now they come on with a program saying the military says that, well, actually, we had something like 24 F-16s in the area flying around, on some kind of exercise. And I just about choked right there. If you'll think back to the morning of 9/11 when we were actually under attack and they sent out 2 squadrons of F-16s, those 2 squadrons were 2 each, 4. That's the most they could get together. And they're trying to tell us they had 24 flying around in Texas on the night of the sightings of the Stephenville. It's just more lies and smoke screen. They just will not tell us the truth of what's going on.
Do you know if that's ever been a lot of, some major sightings, they say, repeat, like the Phoenix Lights and things like that?
Right.
Has Stephenville ever been repeated?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It continued on after the news died away, and about a year later there were more going through there over there. Yeah. And it's the same thing with the Phoenix Lights. When most people, especially the UFO researchers, they all know about the Phoenix flyover of, I think that was 1995?
97.
And 97, thank you. And but then nobody pays attention to that the year after they came back. It's not the only time this thing's flown over Phoenix.
Yeah.
But see, people don't know that because they're not told that by the corporate mass media, so they just think, well, that was an odd thing, but it was probably military flares, like they said.
Now, one of the things that I always question, I can't get my head around it, and that is, why are there hot spots? Why would one ship be over Phoenix, and then a year later the same ship over Phoenix? You know what I mean?
Well, I can give you 2 words: ley lines. The energy grid. They are powered and apparently track along the ley lines, the energy grid that encompasses the world. And so that's why they tend to come over the same areas if it's a particularly hot ley line intersection.
Recently, there was an announcement from NASA that the Hubble had done a 20-year research on the amount of galaxies, and it appears that it was about between 10 and 20 times more than they thought, up to 2 trillion galaxies. So with that in mind, I mean, the possibility of life out there, not just on planets, but on moons as well.
It just multiplies exponentially, right?
Right. But, I mean, the question is, why would we be so unique that we would be visited? I guess that's the question.
Right. And I think the answer is that probably we're not. We're just unique because we're the only ones we know, and so we think we're pretty hot.
Right. But, I mean, why would we be visited instead of other life-bearing planets, or are they being visited too? I mean, that's...
Well, it depends on what stage you're at. If you're at a stage where you have already entered into the intergalactic federation, brotherhood, whatever you want to call it, okay, then, yeah, chances are they come and go, and there's, probably have scenes like in Star Wars where you have all these different races, mixing at the spaceship bar or something. But then if they are even more primitive than the Earth is, and just, number one, how do you determine where the Earth is now anyway? If I was to come to your house, you've got running... you got a flushable toilet, running water, and heat, and air conditioning, and nice furniture, and hey, you're top of the head, top of the line. But if I was to go to certain parts of India or Africa or Asia, and find people living in mud huts, still trying to warm water over a fire. Again, the Earth is just not. We're just not one homogeneous world. Mm-hmm. We're a whole collection of different species at different stages of evolution. So I don't know. I guess to answer your question, it depends on what stage of the evolution the planet's on. If they're very, very primitive, very, very backwards, then I think you would be interfering with their natural progress by showing yourself and by trying to interact, with this other species. Whereas, on the other hand, if you leave them alone, quarantine them, and just leave them to their own devices, then maybe, perhaps, maybe with a gentle nudge now and then, you can push them on up the evolutionary ladder and get them to the point to where they could be part of the intergalactic family.
Yeah. One of the things that when you talk about being seeded, that's always been a thought of mine, a possibility, of course, that could be. But also, is it just intelligent life that's seeded, or could part of the animal kingdom be seeded as well? I mean, if we were an experiment, they'd probably, if that's what we really were.
Who knows? Would it make sense? If you're going to come down here and seed with some intelligent, primitive life, then why not throw in a few animals, that might prove productive or helpful,
Yeah, as long as it didn't eat the...
Yeah.
Getting back to MJ12, you mentioned earlier, I have kind of a deflated announcement to make, and that is several months ago, I had been at an auction gallery a friend of mine owns, and he told me he had some papers when he found out that I did a show on UFOs. He had some papers for me to look at that belonged to a retired CIA agent who passed away. And he showed them to me, and they were the MJ12 documents, a copy of them. So I ended up speaking, I didn't speak, but my friend spoke with the son of the man and asked why he thought his father might have those, being in the CIA and all that. And the answer was kind of, no answer at all. Like, he had no idea the papers were there, and he had no idea why his father would have them, and as far as he knew, his father didn't have any interest in UFOs. That's the only answer I can give the listening audience. So it could just be that he had some type of passing interest, or someone sent them to him. Who knows? I know that they're real controversial, those papers, anyway. So it might have been just something circulating around.
Well, it's just controversial because, it's easy enough for somebody in authority to stand up and say, oh, that's not true. And that's the nature of cover-up. That's how they've covered up the Kennedy assassination. That's how they've covered up 9/11. That's how they've covered up any number of scandals and corruptions and stuff. It's like Napoleon said, it's unnecessary to bury the truth, only necessary to obscure it until nobody cares. And that's what they've done. They just, come up with a theory and a counter-theory and a charge and a counter-charge until the average person just shakes their head and goes, oh, man, I don't want to hear any more about that.
Do you think that's what happened with Roswell, would you say?
Yeah, exactly. That's why they had cover story on top of cover story with some backup cover stories. I know some years ago a friend of mine published a book, The Truth of Roswell, and he had met an old couple who had worked there at the time, and they told him this incredible tale about how that it was a bunch of Japanese prisoners or something like that with their heads shaven, and that they'd put in this capsule, and that there had been an accident and it caught fire. And I don't know, just this whole weird story, and it just didn't jive with anything that I knew about Roswell. But it was a fascinating story. And so, I went to my friend. I said, you met these people? Yeah. Do you think they were lying to you? No, I think they were credible people. And after talking with him for a while, I decided, okay, I think maybe they were credible people. So what's going on? Well, I just kept digging further, and I said, look, does either one of these people, did they have direct knowledge of what they're telling you about? And he thought for a minute. He said, well, no. They were told this by their superiors. Aha. So, see, somebody way back there laid this cover story on this couple, knowing that in their dotage they would probably finally come out and tell the story, which would just add more controversy, another theory, if you will, and it would help cover the truth up. And that's how it works.
I sometimes wonder, if years, like 100 years from now, if we still don't know for sure, we still have no proof that we're being visited as we have today, no real proof. 100 years from now, what will Roswell be like? Is it just going to be, right now it's kind of it's a fair during every July 4th.
Right.
And
even during the rest of the year, yeah. When I first went to Roswell, it was just a sleepy little New Mexico town, and it's a lot smaller than most people think. And most of the people I talked to, they didn't care, and they didn't even want to talk about UFOs or flying saucers, And in fact, a lot of them are going, there's nothing to it, because they don't want, it's kind of like where I live out here in rural Texas. People live out in the country because they want to be left alone. Okay? Mm-hmm. And so when you try to bring up especially weird stuff, their first tendency is to go, oh, no, there's nothing there. Don't worry about that. But then, of course, they began to discover how lucrative it could be commercially to market to your audience. And so, boy, the last few times I've been in Roswell, I mean, they got little aliens all up and down the street. Oh, yeah. They had a UFO crashing into the front of the Walmart. The whole town now is on the bandwagon, And I think that in the future, well, number one, it's not going to be such a big deal, because I think we're very, very close to where enough people are going, yes, okay, all right, it's real, they're here, and we just start accepting it. But if everything rocks along the way it is, I think that in the near future, Roswell is just going to be a bigger and bigger tourist destination as more and more people realize the reality of UFOs.
So you think, I don't want to necessarily use the word of disclosure, but do you think that's near the future, that people will accept that we are being visited?
I think the majority of people have accepted it now. It's just not being announced. You know what I mean when I'm talking about the tipping point? Mm-hmm. There's a tipping point where a certain percentage of the public begin to believe something, and it doesn't have to be a majority. It could be 15%, 20%, maybe 25%. But at a certain point, when enough people begin to realize what the truth is, then it tips, and then pretty soon everybody is pretty well accepting that. Case in point, in 1964, the poll showed virtually nobody believed that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone assassin of President Kennedy, but it was never talked about and it was never acknowledged by the mass media. Today, the mass media is still not acknowledging it, but the polls show that 80% or more, you go ask somebody, was there a conspiracy to kill Kennedy, and 80% of them are going to say yes, okay? So it's just, we reached the tipping point, and now that most people know, yes, there was a conspiracy. Well, we're going to hit that same point. If there is not an open admission, which probably isn't coming, but an open disclosure, for example, if there is disclosure, it's probably going to be up to them. All they got to do is come hover over a big city in daytime and hang there long enough for the news crews to get out and get good pictures of it, and the game's up. There they are.
I think if this was going to happen, they would have done it a long time ago. I don't know. It just seems It seems so evasive and
well, okay, but
unrepeatable.
here's the thing. First, you got to go back. It hadn't been that many years ago. In the same newspaper that carries the Aurora spaceship crash story, there's a little item from Granbury, Texas, and it says last night at 9:30, the Riddle rifles, while drilling the Riddle rifles, whatever they were, some kind of militia, I guess, said the leader saw the air machine of which we've heard so much, and being a populist, he couldn't stand the sight of the air machine, so he ordered the company to open fire, and they did, and soon the whole town was aroused. Okay? What is it, Joe Bob? I don't know. Shoot at it. And that's what they do, okay? And that's what's been the usual thing all the way. Go back to the 50s movie. You know, they hear something weird out in the desert, and they go running out there with their gun, right? So I think that's what's kind of held things up in the past. And today, maybe we wouldn't be quite so fast on the trigger, but nevertheless, they have to be concerned about how the revelation that we're not alone is played out to the public, because it could be very traumatic to a lot of people in political ways, religious ways, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's kind of been an agreement all the way around, both for humans, non-humans, everybody else. They say, I think the best thing for right now is just, keep it on the QT. And the people who want to study, want to open their mind, want to learn, want to understand that all this is real, that's fine. They can do that. But then all the rest of the people, they can just, go their merry way. In fact, if you'll think about it, this is exactly the tack that the government has taken, because let's face it, the government is the government of all of us, okay? And there's a good many of us who just frankly don't want to know. Okay? So, like, when it comes to Roswell, they say, oh, well, it was just crash dummies. Okay, well, now people who've actually studied the case, like yourself, myself, we know that that's just not right. It's not right. It's just simply not right, because they didn't even have the crash dummies test until starting in 1954. So on the one hand, we go, wow, they're lying to us. And then, holy cow, they're lying to us. That must mean it's really true. So it's kind of a backhanded way of confirming that, yes, something very unearthly happened at Roswell. But for the people who don't want to know, they can sleep peacefully at night and say, well, the government said it was crash dummies, that's right. And then go on back to sleep, So the government is actually trying to take care of both sides of the issue and both types of people, which may or may not be such a bad thing. But I know you and I would probably feel a lot better if they just tell us the truth.
Yeah. I agree also that, a lot of people, it's just not part of their thoughts. They're busy with life and they're absorbed with what's right in front of them, and not even, a lot of people don't even think about, any part of space, for instance. So unless, if someone has a sighting, generally speaking, that will change everything.
You're right. Well, I don't know. You can go on the internet right now and just go to Google Images and type in UFO. You can spend days, weeks, maybe even months looking at all the stuff that pops up there. Now, if you're ready to include that in your world outlook, then that's cool. And you go, wow, there they are, and look at all these different ones and blah, blah, blah. And, of course, some of them are really fuzzy, and some of them are pretty sharp and clear, and some of them are really kind of dangerous looking, and some of them look kind of just like little get-arounds. And so, you can kind of put into it what you want. But if you don't want to know about that and don't believe in them, and you're not going to go look at those images, and for your little world, they're not there.
Yeah. It's funny. My son had not even thought about UFOs until I told him I did it. I told him I started the show on it, told him about my sighting all in one night, and he started looking into it, and he's still like on the fence whether they exist or not. I'm totally, especially doing the show, how many people I've talked to, I have no idea at this point, but I really do think there is something going on. I still don't know exactly what, and I've said this before on the show that it may be something we haven't really even thought of yet, that is possible.
Right.
Some of the ideas of what people are seeing are pretty incredible,
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, I've heard some doozies, including from some military people who somehow or another got information that a UFO kept appearing above this lake up in, I believe, the Northwest. So they went over there and actually set up on it. And the most incredible thing about this thing is when the UFO appeared, that was it. It didn't come from somewhere. It just appeared.
Wow.
It just kind of materialized out of thin air. And they were all looking at it and trying to get some pictures and trying to get some information, and then apparently became aware of them because it began to turn towards them and was, I can't remember now, maybe it was like sending out some kind of beam. Anyway, it scared the crap out of them, and they all took off and ran.
Wow.
These are tough military guys.
Yeah, well, then that gets into, you hear about other dimensions or, possible dimensional travel, because there is the problem of the amount of, distance. But I do think
but we don't know. See, everything up until now, we've always based what we think we know about how they transfer, how they communicate, everything else, just based on what our technology is, okay? Mm-hmm. Now, if you took off from the Earth in a rocket ship with jet fuel, and you're pushing those turbines or whatever, it's going to take you 100 years to get 1 light year or something, But what if they're using technology that we don't yet know about?
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, what they're talking about now, and then now you're getting into physics and geophysics and all kinds of stuff where they're talking about wormholes and other dimensions and folding time and space, and we just really don't know what's out there. But I for one happen to believe that if man can even conceive of it, we can do it.
Yeah, that's for sure, and I think we'll be seeing more and more of that. What would you consider? We've talked about a couple of different major cases, but what would you consider the most compelling UFO sighting?
The most compelling UFO sighting.
Doesn't have to be a mass sighting, but I mean, what would you consider like one of the? I can say one of the most profound. I mean, is it Roswell or Rendlesham Forest, or there's a whole bunch of ones that people consider the best and why?
Well, I'm sitting there juggling all of those, and the one that Lonnie Zamora was mixed up in, the New Mexico State Patrolman. I don't know. There's just so many, because in all of these, you've got physical evidence, you've got witness element, evidence, et cetera, et cetera. Let's just say I think the most compelling argument is the cumulative effect of all of these.
Yeah.
Okay?
Wow.
If there was just 1 or 2 little instances on the record, and maybe it's this and maybe it's that, and maybe they were drunk, maybe they were smoking the wrong weed or something, then you could always write that off. But, man, when you get all of these such good cases, then I think the cumulative effect is proof that we're not alone and that something's going on and we're not being told about it.
Yeah. And I mentioned before that, if the government knows about it, what part of the government would know about it? What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, again, I think that whether they're calling it MJ-12, I think there still exists a group, probably within the scientific directorate of the Joint Chiefs and the National Security Council that is in charge of this whole thing, and they even screen the President of the United States. They don't tell him anything if he doesn't have a need to know. And I think they're the ones that's playing footsie with this. Now, from what I understand from sources, that there is an internal split going on between MJ-12 or between this UFO group, and with some of the younger people saying, hey, okay, it's time to just clear the air. Let's just tell people what's going on. I don't think we're going to have mass panic, and I don't think all the churches are going to close down. Let's just go ahead and tell the truth. But some of the older hands are still sticking in there, and I can kind of understand that because, how are they going to look if it ever comes out that they were in charge and they lied to us for 70 years,
Yeah.
So nobody wants to fade that heat. So they're still saying, no, it's not yet time. Not quite, not yet. But, hey, but I want to tell you, I really believe it's getting close. It's getting really, really close.
Do you think that they really know what's going on, or do you think they just have an idea?
That's another big problem. I'm not sure anybody knows precisely what's going on, even the alien races. There are different races. They have different agendas. They have different imperatives. Some of them may be a little more kindly disposed towards humans than others. Number one, I don't particularly worry about some alien race is going to come Independence Day, bomb the world, blow up the White House, because if that was the case, they would have done it long before now.
Right.
But I do believe that there is a contest going on about who's who and what's what, and what their motives are, what their agendas are, what their imperatives are. And I think that this is why they are not even certain themselves who the players are and what the game plan is, and neither are some of the human leaders. And so I think it's just kind of a mutual agreement that, well, we just won't talk about this, because nobody, I think, has a clear-cut playbook as to exactly what's going on and why.
Mm-hmm. How about, do you think that different countries will interact with other countries as far as...
They already are. Other countries are so far ahead of the United States, it's not even funny. Russia, France, Buenos Aires, Argentina, Mexico, a lot of these countries, they actively talk about all this on national television. Okay, and they have people coming on telling their stories. They're talking about, they're real open. And I think, in fact, most of the world now is beginning to join together to talk openly about the UFO issue, except the very controlled media of the United States. And I think the reason for that is because it is very much under the control of the CIA and the NSA, other alphabet agencies, who for a long time have been involved in the UFO issue. And again, they don't want to be the ones to go, oh, well, we told you there's nothing there, but, well, okay, actually there is. And they just don't want to go there. So they just keep the lid on the bottle.
Yeah, I know there are some people that are trying to get more interaction, like Leslie Kane. I know she's, has tried to initiate some type of interaction with other countries.
Well, see, she and Dr. Greer and all these others who are they're looking for the right congressional committee. They're looking for the right press conference, and they're going to blow it wide open. It ain't going to happen. Ain't going to happen until the people in control of our mass media decide that it's time to tell the truth. None of that's going to go anywhere. In fact, if you'll think, when Greer had all his whistleblowers there in June of 2001, and they had a big thing at the National Press Club. They had all the big networks there, and they had very credible military veterans coming forward and saying, I saw this, I know this, I worked with this. And you would think that would make huge news, and yet there they all were, but yet it never really got reported on in a big way. But then finally, as the months drew on, it got to be July and August. Well, the Internet was kind of alive with this stuff, and more people were picking up on the idea, wow, they're really talking about these UFOs. They're really, they're really making some headway here. And then what happened? 9/11, and it all quit.
Yeah, that kind of adjusted the whole world.
Yeah. Which may have been another factor. You don't pull things off like that for just one reason. You have to wait till there's a whole collection of reasons and excuses to pull something of that magnitude off. So that may have been just one of them.
Yeah. Now, when you said, in the very beginning of the show, you said journalism left you. What did you mean by that?
I mean, there are no journals anymore. There's just corporate advertising placement entities, if you happen to get a little news mixed in with your ads, great, so much the best for you, but it's all the same stuff. It's just all pablumized. In fact, when you get to the Northeast, you've got the AP and you've got the the major news networks and stuff like that, they already have companies now that they're all jointly involved in, who then send out one crew to tape an interview with somebody, and then they come out and then they all use that same interview. That's why you turn to one channel and you see the same guy saying the same thing he just said on the other channel. All right, now they think this is good because it saves them money. Okay, great, but it's terrible for news because you're only getting one viewpoint. You know, and if we go back to the good old days when you'd have 3 and 4 different networks and they'd all send their own representatives and they'd all ask the person different questions, and then you would kind of open up the dialogue and you might get some actual real answers, but so it's not happening anymore. In fact, I am just absolutely. I'll give you an example. I'm reading one of the national news magazines the other day, and they're talking about Putin, the dictator of Russia. What? Wait a minute. I don't know Putin, but no, you know, I know he was elected, and I know that I hear from people who've been to Russia, and they say most people like Putin.
Yeah,
you know?
I spent a month in Russia.
And I know people who say Obama is a dictator, but you don't ever see them saying President Obama, the dictator of America. That's just slanted journalism. That's just slanted. That's propaganda is all that is, you know. Yeah. You know, he's the bad guy and we're the good guy. Well, wait a minute. Okay, who says so? And besides that, if you'll actually stop and look at what the Russians have done, not what everybody says they've done and not what everybody's accusing them of, just go actually look and see what they've done. What have they done? Well, let's see, they voluntarily pulled their military out of Eastern Europe after the collapse of communism. And they said, hey, we'll just go back to being friends, and we'll pull our military out of Eastern Europe if you'll guarantee not to expand NATO. And we said, okay, we agreed. And then we broke it. They pulled out of Eastern Europe, and now we're ringing Russia with missiles on the Ukraine, Poland, other nations that we're bringing into NATO through expansion. So, you see, wait a minute, when you look at who's doing what, and then now they're mad at them for bombing in Syria. Well, wait a minute, who started all that? We did, because we created the Syrian rebels, and we armed them. And then found out they were ISIS. And then they grew and grew and grew with us still arming them, okay? And then suddenly we had to fight them. All right, now we got to go fight ISIS. So then Russia says, oh, you guys want to fight ISIS? Here, let us help you. And they went in there with Russian air power, and in about 2 weeks they did more damage to ISIS than we'd done over the past 2 years because they were our guys. And we were stuck. We couldn't really attack Russia and blame Russia because we couldn't very well say, hey, you don't bomb those people. Those are our people, you know. So we were kind of caught, and now that's what makes everybody mad at Russia. All they're doing is what we were doing. It's amazing, but nobody thinks clearly anymore. They just listen to the media, and they just get led around by the nose.
Yeah, and you said earlier that the media is owned by 5 different corporations or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
With interlocking boards of directors and ownership, which means there's only a handful of people that control everything you see and hear. And I'm not just talking about news. I'm talking about movies, magazines, TV, satellite, cable, books, publishing, book clubs, billboards, magazines, you name it. These 5 corporations and this handful of people that control them, they own it all. That's why in this election cycle, you'd have to be a moron not to understand that the media has all been behind Hillary Clinton. The mass media. The only place you hear any kind of dissenting voice is on alternative media.
Well,
they're shutting that down.
Yeah, I'm trying not to go political here because it's.
I know.
But anyway, I think the world does need a.
Well, whoa! I got to correct you on one thing. Yeah. Actually, I'm with you. I don't want you to go political, and I don't think we need to be talking about political things. But can we talk about criminality?
I think it's kind of
surely talking about criminality can be considered a topic worthy of public discussion.
I think it's going to be tied into political. Yeah.
Well, you know, supposedly we're a nation of law, and if you break the law, then you're a lawbreaker, and you're supposed to be punished, right? But
yeah. Well, I mean, you can go back to big banking. You can see all the different, in the 2008 crash, It's all about influence and money and
exactly.
There's more than one set of rules. I agree about that, and I also think the world could use a really good media investigative journalism. I think that people would really get involved in that. Someone that really is not afraid to ask questions. And
right. Well, that's what we need. See, but you don't see that anymore.
No, you don't. Yeah. You go back to, like you said, the earlier days, and they were out there. There was a lot of that going on. And
well, that's because you go back and think of some of the late great newscasters like Walter Cronkite and I don't know, the guys who were on KERA, McNeil, Lair, these guys. If you go back, you find out that they were actually educated and trained as journalists, first and foremost, and then they gravitated. Most of them started in newspaper, and then they gravitated into TV. And so anyway, to begin with, they were good journalists. We don't have that today. All we have are the talking heads that are the so-called anchors. In Britain, they call them presenters, and that's a much more correct title. They just read whatever's put in front of them and then try to put a happy face on, So it's amazing that we actually get any truth about anything.
Yeah. So we're getting toward where we can wrap this up, but do you have anything going on?
Next weekend I'm going to be in Santa Clara for the Alien Con.
Oh, I never even heard of that. Wow.
Well, I hadn't either, but they said, you need to come on out here, and I said, okay. So anyway, holler at me. I'll give you a report once I get back.
Okay. And how about books? Are you doing any more writing?
Oh, yeah. I got a new book in now. It's a little premature to be talking about it because it's not going to be, won't be coming out until probably the late spring or something like that. So, but hey, that'll give us another chance to talk about more stuff.
Right. But it's been a real pleasure, Jim. Like I said, I've had people wanting to have you on the show ever since day one, and you're a fun man to talk to. It's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's quite all right, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you, Martin. And let's do it again sometime. Meanwhile, go to jimmars.com, and you can see all my books and all my DVDs and all my stories that I post that probably you're not going to find in the mainstream media. And then while you're at it, go to BattlefieldEarth.com and check out that audio book with 150,000 sound effects. It's really something.
That's something else. And just remember, it's Mars spelled with 2 R's.
Yes.
All right. Thanks so much, Jim.
Thank you. Adios.
Adios. Well, that's it for the show. Thanks so much for listening, and thank you for your patience. Again, we'll be back next week with Stan Friedman and Kathleen Marden. Don't forget to keep your eyes to the sky.